Be careful, my friend, where you tread, for I warn you now, there are spoilers ahead. Welcome to the strange and festive world of terror at Collinwood. Yes, 'tis I, Penny Dreadful. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, or should I say Merry Hexmas, for it is indeed the Christmas episode of Terror at Collinwood, and I am thrilled to have you here because we're heading into a milestone year for Dark Shadows. 2026, of course, marks the 60th anniversary of Dark Shadows, and hey, I was thinking the other day, it's also the 5th anniversary of Terror at Collinwood next year in 2026, because I started this podcast in 2021, so next year will be the 5th anniversary of Terror at Collinwood, and gosh, I have a lot to talk about in this episode, but it's going to be a little bit of a festive episode, but also kind of looking back and looking ahead to the future as well. And speaking of looking ahead to the future, let's look at next summer 2026, because the Dark Shadows news page has announced indeed that the official Dark Shadows 60th anniversary celebration event will take place on the weekend of Friday, July 31st, Saturday, August 1st, and Sunday, August 2nd, 2026, man. It's happening at the Westin Los Angeles Airport Hotel, and it will include guest panels, presentations and performances, autograph sessions, rare video screenings, memorabilia for sale, a charity auction, a luncheon with the Dark Shadows actors, a costume contest, and other activities to be announced. Special discounted hotel room rates are available now by using the dedicated link that I will include in the show notes for this episode, or you can telephone the hotel directly at 310-216-5858 and request the Dark Shadows sleeping room rate, which will be available from Tuesday, July 28th through Monday, August 3rd, and more details will follow soon. Now, tickets for the event itself are not available yet. There isn't a site yet where you can get tickets for the event, but that'll be coming soon, and as soon as I hear anything, I will certainly announce it on the podcast. Keep your eyes on the Dark Shadows news page, social media. I'm sure that will be announced there when that goes up. Also, the hotel rooms are selling fast. Grab the rooms if you want to go. And yes, it is on the West Coast. I know some people are griping about that. You got to move on. You got to move on from that. And obviously, priorities. You got to pay your rent, you got to pay your mortgage, you got to get your groceries. But if the Dark Shadows event fits into your budget, then certainly this is your last chance to experience a festival level event, 3 days of Dark Shadows celebration. It's going to be amazing, I am sure. And obviously, I know some people have health issues, they can't travel, of course. But hey, if you can go, if you're on the fence and thinking about going, consider the fact that this is going to be the last time that something like this is going to happen. Smaller events, I'm sure, will still continue. The Lyndhurst events and things like that will probably still continue. The Seaview Terrace for those private parties, those are over, most likely, sadly. Those are probably done because the Seaview Terrace has sold. If you follow how things are going on Zillow, the house has sold. There's a new owner for Collinwood, Seaview Terrace in Newport, Rhode Island, the iconic Collinwood from the TV series. So those fan parties, sadly, are probably over. I'm sure there are going to be other kinds of parties, but anyway, the biggie for the 60th anniversary is in Los Angeles, so don't miss it. I am going to be there. Please come over and say hello. I will have some Terror at Collinwood stickers. I'm going to have some new postcards made up with the Paul Garner artwork on them. And I will be working the event, though. I think it's going to be an all-hands-on-deck situation for this one. So I'm going to probably be busy, but I would love to say hi to you. It's going to be a blast. And there's more cool stuff for the 60th anniversary of Dark Shadows. Also from the Dark Shadows news page, the classic original music from Dark Shadows soundtrack album is returning this January as a CD reissue from Note for Note Music. The new edition includes 9 bonus tracks, and the first 125 copies will be signed by David Selby, Quentin himself. Now, unfortunately, the David Selby signed CDs are sold out as of this recording. They are sold out, but you can still get the CD with the bonus tracks, and I'll put a link in the show notes where you can order from Note for Note. And then also up for pre-order at Hermes Press is the reprint of Barnabas Collins' A Personal Picture Album, a pictorial look at Jonathan Frid on the set in Dark Shadows, as well as photographs of his stage career from his personal collection. While the book is a reprint of the original paperback library volume of the same name, with the same cover and interior photos taken from the original source material, there are dozens of new photos from the Dan Curtis archives. And again, I will put a link to a Hermes Press pre-order page where you can get that book. Now then, as we enter 2026 and our big 60th anniversary celebration for Dark Shadows, like I said, it's also going to be the 5th anniversary of Terror at Collinwood, which I started recording in April of 2021. And I posted the first episode in May of 2021. One of the highs of this past year was Terror at Collinwood winning the Rondo Hatton Classic Horror Award for Best Podcast. And thank you again to everyone who voted. I really appreciate that. That meant so much to me that you took the time to do that. And since then, I've been thinking about some of what I want to do going forward. And this is where you're going to come in just a minute. But I also want to reaffirm my mission statement from when I first launched this podcast, and which is still right at the top of the website, which is that Terror at Collinwood explores and celebrates Dark Shadows storylines and characters, examining the show's important place in Gothic horror and pop culture history, while featuring in-depth discussions and interviews with fans, creators, cast, and crew. And I think I'm still doing that, but sometimes I worry that I'm not, and I don't want to lose sight of that mission statement. One thing I really want to do in 2026 is reestablish the idea that something that makes Dark Shadows really special is the fact that it's such an escape. I was talking with a friend recently, and we agreed that no matter how creepy and weird and monstrous things were in Collinsport, there was always this special quality that made it fun. And I always tell myself that before I record the podcast. Dark Shadows is fun because I want this podcast to feel fun, and I want my guests to have fun. I don't argue with my guests. That I don't always agree with them. Trust me, just because I don't bicker with my guests doesn't mean I agree with everything they say. But I'm not going to fight with people on the podcast. I may politely disagree with people. But anyway, I think fun and escapism is an important key to Dark Shadows. It has this crazy, weird, dreamlike, gothic quality to it. And it's not here in this often crappy world that we're in. It's a way to get away from that. Horrible things happen on Dark Shadows. Yes, vampires will drink your blood, and witches will put spells on you, and werewolves will tear you apart. They'll harm you, and they might end up killing you. And even bad things that happen in the real world happen in Dark Shadows. People get blackmailed, and people get murdered in traditional ways. But usually there's some supernatural twist to it. But it's all somehow removed. It's all somehow not as bad as the nightly news, or getting bullied at school, or being abused and dealing with trauma from your abuse, or, nuclear war. And I think that's an important key to keep in mind in licensed media for Dark Shadows. That's important. And also the Gothic origins of Dark Shadows. I think you need to go to Gothic literature, Gothic tales, the stuff that Dan Curtis loved and gave to the writers to repurpose for Dark Shadows, right? But also that Dark Brigadoon quality is very important as well. So that kind of hybrid of those things. And then the soap opera element is having it serialized in this sustained, multi-layered world that just exists as an ongoing thing. But it's an escape. And I think back to my early days of watching Dark Shadows, and that's a key thing that jumps out at me. Fun and escapism. I loved all of the classic horror stuff, and I still do. And it was all an escape, but with Dark Shadows, that was especially so. And I think because it was such an immersive world. And I also want to hear from you about what you want to hear more of on the show and what you want to hear less of on the show. So a few months back, I created an anonymous questionnaire in Google Forms, and I posted it in the relatively new Terror at Collinwood Facebook page, which I hope you will follow. By the way, there's a link to it in the show notes. And I encourage you to click through also in the show notes to the link that I have to the questionnaire, which again is completely anonymous. I don't know who's answering those questions, but please feel free to answer because that will help me shape the podcast going forward. Please answer as many or as few questions as you like. And if you watch the YouTube version of the podcast, also feel free to leave your comments and suggestions in the show notes. What do you want more of? What do you want less of? For example, I'm going to just pull up the Google form here. What would you like to hear more of on the podcast? The current mix of topics, don't change anything. More Dark Shadows storyline discussions, more Dark Shadows cast and crew interviews. I could think that one kind of goes without saying. Everybody wants to hear more Dark Shadows cast and crew interviews. More character analysis, more discussions about licensed media, discussions about product. So it's a big love fest for Dark Shadows, and that's why I'm doing it. And I like to have fun talking about Dark Shadows with other fans. But I'm also, of course, aware of the fact that it's a show with an audience, and I want you to be happy with what you're listening to and giving you what you want to listen to. But yeah, one of the things I want to do is look at Dark Shadows in the larger gothic horror, gothic romance genre in context. And I also want to look at the escapism and fun aspect of Dark Shadows. I don't know, there's just this cozy feeling I associate with the show. Sitting on the carpeted floor of my grandparents' living room, a lot of times with my little cousin Karen next to me and Uncle Valdemar hanging out on the couch, and all of us just transfixed by the eerie events on the show, and the smell of my grandmother's cooking coming from the kitchen, mixed with this hint of burning incense, and the hourly chiming of the clock in the living room, which sounded exactly like the one in the Collinwood foyer. And sometimes my grandmother would come in and watch it with us, and she'd hide her eyes. I've talked about this before. She was so scared of Barnabas when he'd show his fangs, and she'd scream when he'd show his fangs and hide her eyes, and we were so amused by that. And a lot of times she'd ask me to translate what they were saying on the show. You know, what did he say? And these memories and feelings are just inextricably linked with my memories of watching Dark Shadows. You might say I come from a Dark Shadows family, as episode 45 of the podcast will attest. I interviewed several family members in that one. And I've talked about this before. My family moved to the United States from the Azores Islands of Portugal in the 1960s. My mom, my Uncle Valdemar, my Aunt Agatha, and my grandmother all watched Dark Shadows together as soon as they arrived in 1967. And my Uncle Val was 9. He was the most obsessed with it, and he became a grade A 60s monster kid, comic book fan, rock and roll fan. And I was born in the early 1970s. And a lot of people think I was an original fan too, and I wasn't, but I was so immersed and pickled in Dark Shadows, yes, pickled in Dark Shadows, that I might as well have been, because it was right from the get-go. Much like Maxwell Smart, I missed it by that much. But my uncle wasted a little time in trying to scare the heck out of me by telling me stories about Barnabas and doing imitations of Barnabas and Boris Karloff and all the horror stars, giving me his famous Monsters of Filmland magazines, horror comics, Dark Shadows bubblegum cards. And this was in the 70s. I was young, and I was really scared to look at those black and white pictures of Barnabas with his fangs bared. They were so eerie, but I was also fascinated by them. I was fixated on them, but I was terrified at the same time. Anyway, in the 1970s, my Dark Shadows memories were stories about the show from Uncle Val, famous Monsters of Filmland, the bubblegum cards. There was a gold key issue that my Uncle Louis, another uncle, who was Uncle Val's best friend, the Uncle Louis is my dad's brother, he had a gold key issue, number 9. So I would read that over and over. And I also remember, this is crazy too, because if you think about how popular Dark Shadows was in the 60s, not that long after, it seemed like nobody knew what it was. There was a kid in my 4th grade class named Jeff Collins, I remember. And my teacher, Mrs. Fortin, used to call him Barnabas. And she asked the class one day, does anybody know who Barnabas Collins is? And of course, I immediately raised my hand, and I was the only one who knew. Nobody else raised their hand. I said, he's the vampire from Dark Shadows. And she was thrilled that I knew. And a few days later, I ripped out that corner picture of Barnabas from the Gold Key comic issue, Uncle Louis' Gold Key comic issue, and I brought it in. And she asked me to pass it around the entire class so that everybody could see and learn who Barnabas was. So needless to say, Mrs. Fortin was pretty cool. I finally got to watch Dark Shadows in two major ways. In 1982, my uncle, he acquired these grainy multi-generation tapes from syndication from his friend Mark. I mean, this must have been like 5th or 6th generation tapes, 6-hour tapes. And they started with Barnabas's release from his coffin by Willie up until almost the end of 1795. It was close to the end of 1795. And then the tapes ran out. So I would watch those tapes over and over again, usually with Uncle Val and my little cousin Karen. But I would stay over at my grandparents' house. And Christmas memories, you want to talk about Christmas memories? I would go there the week leading up to Christmas and just watch those tapes all day. And I remember my grandfather walking into the room, my grandfather George, he would just shake his head and walk out of the room and he'd see we were still watching Dark Shadows hours later. I mean, it was nonstop, except for breaks to watch Universal horror movies, Hammer horror movies, classic comedies, Poe Corman cycle. We watched so much stuff. I mean, it was a great time. Maybe a year or so later, we found out that Dark Shadows was airing on WCVX channel 58, which was a commercial UHF station out of Vineyard Haven in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And Uncle Val lived with my grandparents, while my Aunt Agatha and my little cousin Karen lived downstairs. And Uncle Val, he hooked up the roof antenna, which had been disconnected. Actually, I don't know if he got another one or if it was the existing one and he just reconnected it because by then he had cable, but you couldn't get channel 58 over cable. You had to get it over the antenna. So we could watch the over-the-air signal. And I'm old enough, I do remember the antenna from when I was a kid in the 70s. I don't think my parents got cable until they got the Portuguese channel in New Bedford. And even then, they held out for a while on that. So we didn't get cable until the 80s. So we had the antenna for a while. But anyway, Uncle Val, like I said, he lived with my grandparents. So he got the roof antenna. And I remember the dial, trying to get the signal in. But anyway, this was about a year after the tapes ended in 1795. And we started watching it early on in the Adams storyline. It was shortly after Dr. Lang's death. Because I remember Adam was already locked up in the old house basement cell. And Channel 58 ran it for years, up until partway into the 1970 parallel time, which is pretty great. It was the end of the World Vision syndication package that they had available. And this was in the mid 80s, so we were able to record it on the VCR with a timer and collect all the shows. But I was paranoid that the timer was going to malfunction, which sometimes it did. And I wanted to watch it when it aired, right when it aired, because I was on the edge of my seat with the cliffhangers. I mean, it was aired Monday through Friday. And I mean, if you can imagine, I mean, most of you probably know, those cliffhangers were killers. You got to watch it when it aired. And I was scared that the timer would malfunction because Uncle Val would set it before he'd go to work. But I used to get off the bus, and I was a teenager at this point. So I was either in the last year of junior high school or I was already in high school. And I'd walk down to my grandparents' house. But initially WCVX played Dark Shadows earlier in the day. I think it was like at 11:30 in the morning. That might have even been before that we connected the roof antenna to watch it very early on, because then they switched it to the correct time, which was 4 o'clock. Maybe it was 4:30. It was like 4 or 4:30, which is when it should be on. When it was originally on in the 60s, it was 4 o'clock here anyway. And so it would run Monday through Friday on Channel 58. I didn't have to run to my grandparents' house. I would get off the bus and just kind of saunter down to their house. But in the summer, I actually did have to run because I worked at my Uncle Mario's clothes store. Because I started working there when I was 13 years old. Because if you're a Portuguese kid, you got to go to work. So I'd go to my uncle's clothes store on weekends, wash the windows, sweep the sidewalk, fold the clothes. I do the whole shebang. And but I didn't want to miss Dark Shadows, so and it was a substantial distance from the Uncle Mario's clothes store, my godfather Pedrinho's clothes store. So I'd run down to my grandparents' house down Acushnet Ave in New Bedford. I remember the hot, humid summer days running down the street. And I'd watch the show, get there, watch it with my cousin Karen, and we were both desperate to see it, because of the cliffhanger from the day before. And then after it was over, we usually watch some cartoon that was on after Dark Shadows, and then I would record it. I'd stop the timer, and then I would record it and just pause the commercials. I would take out the commercials, and then when Uncle Val would get home, we'd watch it with him. So we'd watch the same episode twice a day. And sometimes my grandmother would come in and watch it with us too. But I'd watch it twice a day. At one point, Channel 58 threatened to take Dark Shadows off the air. That was the scariest thing ever in Dark Shadows, because it was Channel 58 was going to take it off the air, and it was during the Quentin's Ghost and Werewolf storyline. And I distinctly remember the commercial, and I used to have it on VHS, and I wish I still did, but I don't anymore. And I kick myself because I actually gave those tapes away. Because Uncle Val had all the tapes that he recorded off Channel 58, and then he gave them to me, and he gave me the other ones too. I still have a couple of the original ones that he got from Mark. I have 2 of those, I think, still. But the Channel 58 ones, I gave to my cousin Inish in San Miguel, because she was a Dark Shadows fan too, because her and my cousin Nuno lived in America for years, and then they moved back to San Miguel. And Prima Inish was a big Dark Shadows fan too, and I gave her all of those tapes because I bought the MPI tapes. But unfortunately, in St. Michael and the Azores are very humid weather there, and their TV is down in the cellar. It's a finished basement that they have, and it will get very humid down there. And I asked her recently, actually, if she still had those tapes, because I was looking for this commercial specifically, and she said they had gotten covered in mold years ago, and she had to throw them away. So major bummer there. But I do remember the commercial distinctly, and it was I think it was in June or July maybe, and they showed a clip of Ezra Braithwaite, and Ezra Braithwaite said, "Wait, I have a memory," and then the announcer said, "Who is this man?" And then there was a clip of Quentin, his ghost, looking at that ledger, the book. And then the announcer says, "What is Quentin's secret?" And then there's a clip of Ned Stewart. And the announcer says, "What is he doing here?" "You'll never find out, because as it stands right now, Dark Shadows will be discontinued at the end of the month. There's a chance to save it. Write WCVX, TV 58, Hyannis, Massachusetts." Oh my God. I was freaked out. Oh, I was so freaked out. Dark Shadows was going to get canceled. Oh, no. And I remember getting a petition together. I mean, this was a multi-page petition, stapled. I got so many names on that. I got my entire family to sign it. Every member of my family signed that petition. And like I said, I was working at my Uncle Mario's clothes store. Every customer who came in signed that petition. These poor, older Portuguese people who had no idea what I was asking them to sign. I mean, I explained. I said, "Oh, it's for a TV show that I like. It's going to get canceled." I had to explain it, and they'd chuckle and sign it. But I got a ton of signatures on that. And I'm sure many other people must have written in, because Channel 58 renewed the show, and they kept it on until, like I said, partway into 1970 parallel time. So I like to think that I helped save Dark Shadows on Channel 58. I have such fond memories of Channel 58. I talk about it all the time. I'm even in a Facebook group for Channel 58, and they have a t-shirt now for alumni. And I feel disingenuous buying the shirt, because I didn't work for Channel 58. Like, there are people who worked there in their group, and I kind of want the shirt just because it's Channel 58. So I don't know. I have quite a fondness for that station. And as I'm talking about this and remembering things about my grandmother and my cousin and my uncle and my mom too, and talking about Dark Shadows with her, Dark Shadows is definitely inextricably linked with my family too, in a weird way for me. So it's tied in with that part of my identity too, I guess, in a weird way, if that makes sense. I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but that's something that I think the more I talk about it and think about it and reflect on it, that's certainly something that is part of Dark Shadows for me. Anyway, while that was going on, those airings in the 80s, I discovered my scrapbook memories of Dark Shadows and the Dark Shadows Files magazine, so it must have been around 1986 or so. I was able to find out about the Dark Shadows fandom, subscribe to all the fanzines, World of Dark Shadows, Inside the Old House, the Shadowgram newsletter, and all of them. I collected the merchandise from the ads in the back of the fanzine, so I was able to find stuff like the games and all kinds of cool stuff. I got the cane, which I still have, the silver wolf head cane that some fan sold to me back then for $325, I think. And soon the MPI tapes were announced, and they eventually released the whole series on VHS, and I got them all. Any money I made working at my godfather's clothes store, Uncle Mario's clothes store, went to those tapes and those fanzines and collectibles. And then Sci-Fi Channel started running it. It was the first show they picked up for the Sci-Fi Channel, which was really cool. And then in 1991, the new NBC Dark Shadows, helmed by Dan Curtis himself, was released. And I got to watch the movies finally on TV, and I wish I had gotten to see those in the theater. That's the one thing I wish I had seen those in the theater. But and maybe someday I still will. It was an exciting time to be a Dark Shadows fan. Refocusing a bit. That was in my trip down memory lane, and I'm gonna try to avoid doing that again because you've probably heard all of that before. But going forward, I want to get back to Dark Shadows as escapism. I want to get back to the gothic roots of Dark Shadows. Maybe I should do more solo episodes. Do you want more of that? Less of that? Are you sick of hearing me talk by now? I started the podcast during the pandemic, and it's been such an amazing ride since then. I've spoken to so many great guests, fans, creators, cast, crew members from the show. Discussions have ranged from storylines to cast and crew interviews, fandom history, product discussions, and more. And I have plenty planned for 2026. I have one recorded already. I have several that I have scheduled or that I'm talking to people about scheduling. So there are things I definitely want to do, but I also want to recenter a little bit and not get away from the mission statement of the podcast. So yeah, I'm sorry for the ramble, but don't forget to fill out that questionnaire. The link is in the show notes. Fill out that Terror at Collinwood questionnaire. It is completely anonymous, but let me know what you think, what you want to hear more of going forward, what you want to hear less of going forward. Surprisingly, people really like those question and answer episodes. I wasn't sure if people were going to dig those, but those actually get a lot of response and a lot of listens as well. So I'm going to continue doing those. I got to get back to those. I've done 4 of them and I have not done one for a while. They are a lot of work actually to put those together. So I got to put one of those together this coming year. At least I'm going to at least do 1 or 2 of those. I would like to get more cast members on. I've tried to get 2 recently and that did not work out, alas, but I'm like the shadow that pursues Jeb Hawks. I will not be denied. I will continue to pursue. That sounds pretty creepy, actually. I'm not that bad, but I will not give up. I'm going to bring my little recorder to the Dark Shadows 60th anniversary event, so maybe I can grab some interviews there. Ha ha. Anyway, I think that's a good place to end this episode. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. Book your flight, book your hotel for the Dark Shadows 60th anniversary convention. It's going to be a great time. I can't wait to see you there. And don't forget, please, to subscribe to the podcast on YouTube. If you're doing the YouTube version, like the video. If you're listening on the podcast apps, please rate and review, especially Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those are key, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And on social media, I do appreciate those folks who have commented and do spread the word about the podcast. Spread it like the dream curse. Happy holidays. And for as long as they lived, the Dark Shadows never truly vanished, for there will always be Terror at Collinwood. Terror at Collinwood is a Penny Dreadful production.